So some individuals are asking about how to handle grief, how to
Yes.
go through that process of heartbreak in an easier way than typically we would experience here on Earth.
All right. Well, of course, first and foremost, it's all right if you allow yourselves to grieve, because it can be a process of letting go and expanding and reaching out and connecting on a different level. In most cases, the idea of grief is really nothing to do with the person that has gone on. It has more to do with the idea of the people that have, in your terms, been left behind in physical reality, because they have a wish to expand, they have a wish to understand their connection more to spirit. And so in some senses, they may experience the concept of sadness at having the idea of someone having expanded beyond them. And the belief that goes with it is the inability, again, not true inability, but the belief of inability to maintain that relationship. With more understanding, with more discernment, with more expansion of consciousness, grief will diminish, because the idea is that you remain connected because you can stretch out with your senses and still communicate with those who are now in spirit, or things that you believe you have lost. When you understand there really is no loss, but only change, only shifting into a different state, then grief will be diminished, because nothing really has been lost in your definition. You are not left behind, you are not abandoned, you are not bereft anymore. Those definitions no longer apply when you can begin to perceive that you are actually still in communication with those things and those people that have gone to a different state, because you have expanded your consciousness to the point where you can do that. You realize that. You're more aware of that. Now, because of holding on to the idea that something has been lost, or that there is a true disconnection, many times when spirits attempt to make a communication or a connection with people that are physical, people may still experience grief because they're holding on to those negative definitions of separation. Whereas many times, much later, months, years later, when people might think of those people that have died and experience sorrow and grief at those moments, that may actually be a moment when that being is attempting to communicate and connect with you, but you're only going to experience the energy of the connection as grief and continue to do so because you're continuing to hold on to the negative definition that something has been lost or that there is a disconnection.
It does also come down to the idea of accepting that you have started a new chapter in your relationship with that person.
Yes, yes. Very often, the timing of people going into spirit will actually be an invitation to stretch the consciousness of the people still in physical reality, to reach out, to connect to them, to expand their senses so that they can be more aware of the idea of spirit, and that those beings are still around, just in a different way. That it is an opportunity to expand the relationship and allow it to deliver gifts and understandings and information and energy that will serve the person in physical reality, by allowing that person who has gone into spirit to be more of a guide.
And so when you do die, do you reconnect with the person that you loved, or whoever you...
Well, very often, yes. But again, remember, you're not actually ever disconnected, but you become aware of the fact that the connection has never gone away. And yes, very often you will encounter them on the spirit level, because, remember, you are all already on the spirit level. You never really leave it. That's more your natural state. Physical reality is an idea that a spirit has, that it's no longer in spirit. But it is. Most of the being is in spirit, and therefore in communication with that other being all the time, or at least often enough to know that there is always a connection. So when you pass, when you die, when you expand back into or awaken back into the fact that you never actually left spirit and you've been with that being all the time, then you realize that the idea, that physical reality experience idea of having lost something, was an illusion.
So another psychological question that people have has to do with reactions to negative information or information they're not happy about, or choices that they made that generate feelings of regret and rumination. Oh, woulda, coulda, shoulda. All those kinds of reactions to information.
Yes. But again, you're talking about emotional reactions that are the result of belief systems being held in the conscious mind or unconscious mind of that individual. So again, the idea is it's not about focusing on the idea of the emotional reactions so much as it is acknowledging that they're there, and if you prefer, using them to backtrack what kind of beliefs you would have to be buying into or holding on to for those particular emotional responses to have been generated. Because you have to know, if you understand how things work, that there can be no such thing as an emotion in a vacuum. You don't just automatically have an emotion to information or circumstances or situations. If you didn't have a definition of your relationship, positive or negative, to that circumstance, you wouldn't have any emotional response at all. So the idea is you can use the emotions that come up, not by ignoring them, but by acknowledging that they're there and using them to get in touch with what you would have to believe is true about yourself in this situation in order to have the response or reactions that you're having emotionally. The idea is, again, to understand how these things work, what generates what, and to understand that the beliefs and the definitions always come first, whether you're aware of them or not. That's why the emotions and thought patterns and behaviors can be so valuable in being able to backtrack all the way back to what kind of beliefs would generate those kinds of emotions and thoughts and behaviors. That's what the belief systems use to reinforce themselves, to make themselves seem more real. They reinforce themselves by generating emotions so it feels real, by generating thought patterns that are in alignment with that particular belief system so that you think it's real, and by generating behaviors that go hand in hand with that belief system so that it really seems physically reflectively real, and thus it creates reinforcing experiences in physical reality to drive the point home that this belief now feels like it's true, feels like it's a fact, when in fact it's not a fact. It's just what the belief is generating to reinforce itself, to perpetuate itself, because beliefs have to do that in order for you to have a physical reality experience at all. If beliefs didn't reinforce themselves, the entire illusion of physical reality would just go poof, and you would never have a physical experience. So the idea is to understand that all those emotions that you're talking about, all the feelings that people talk about, are indicators of something you believe to be true about yourself. Because whatever information comes to you, if you understand that it's not true for you, if it's not in alignment with who you prefer to be and what you are, there would be no real negative reaction to it at all. It would be similar to the idea, as we have said before by illustration, of a total stranger coming up to you on the street and giving you information that you know has nothing to do with you because this person doesn't know you. So you don't really react to it per se, in the way that you might by having information come from a familiar person, or by having information come in a way that was outside the expectation or insistence that you had, that certain things had to go a certain way. You wouldn't have the same reaction. So you have to understand that all these things, in a sense, can be treated like strangers who don't really know you. Then you get to decide what information and advice works for you and what can be applied by you to your life. And you get to decide what doesn't relate to you, what isn't your preference, by remaining neutral and objective in the same way you would if a total stranger gave you a piece of information. You would go, well, does this apply to me or not? This person doesn't really know me. Therefore, I get to decide what piece of this information is advice I can take and what piece has nothing to do with me.
And I was thinking of some advice you gave us a while back about, especially for those that have a choice of reacting very negatively instantly and not being able to control themselves in a sense. The
Yes.
idea of taking a moment of pause. Do you want to
Yes.
expand on that?
Well, again, that's your power. Anytime you find yourself reacting, that's usually an indication that there's a belief that's unconscious. And taking a moment of pause to find out what that belief would be gives you the ability to bring it into your conscious mind so that you can decide whether that belief makes sense to hold on to or not, or whether it would be better served if you let it go. So when you find yourself reacting, enjoy a moment of pause. Take a step back and say, wait a minute, why am I reacting this way? What belief would be causing this kind of an emotional reaction so quickly? First of all, it must be something unconscious that I've bought into that I'm unaware of, so what could it be? Then you use your imagination to find out what you would have to believe is true in order to have had that particular emotional response. Taking those moments are the most important thing you can do, because that's living in the moment. That's examining what's happening in the moment. That's staying in the moment. That's not suppressing it, ignoring it, rushing ahead to something else you think is better. That's staying right with the process. That is the most important process, because it's all about knowing yourself, discovering yourself honestly, with integrity, deep diving into what beliefs must exist within your consciousness in order for you to be experiencing the emotional reactions you are, because you understand how things work, and therefore because you understand that this emotion couldn't have been there without a belief existing first.
Hi, Bashar. It's Sheila from Lakeland, and I'm excited to ask you this question. This has to do with me being mistaken either for a celebrity or for someone people know, and I'm wondering what that could mean for me. So after a live event, at one of your live events in Sedona, people saw me and they thought I was the celebrity Frances Fisher, which was really awesome. But as I've traveled all over the globe, people often think I'm someone they know. In fact, I walked into a store and this gentleman walked up to me with open arms and said, "Pat," and he was so happy to see me, but I wasn't Pat. And people will say to me again and again, even after we realize that I'm not the person they think I am, they'll say, "But really, the way you speak and your gestures are just like this person that they know." And I'm wondering what to make of that. It feels like a compliment. It feels really nice, which is great, and maybe that's all there is. But maybe there's something more to it. I mean, when I'm connecting with people, I'm always really excited, like a like a Labrador puppy, to meet people, and it feels like such a good connection, like I'm allowing all that is and source to flow through me and focus on, the best in people and reflect back the best of myself, and all that feels awesome. I'm just wondering if there's something more to it or something that I could use about this thing where people think they know me. Thank you.
Well, again, the idea is that your excitement and desire to be of service in that way makes you a little bit of a chameleon. You will then take on whatever the vibration is that reflects back to them that familiarity, so they feel comfortable enough for you to communicate the energy to them that allows them to move forward in the way that they prefer to. So you're being of service by being a little bit of a reflection of whatever it is they feel they need to be comfortable in accepting that frequency within themselves so they can move forward.
Hi, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Well, firstly, a big thank you for the opportunity to have this interaction.
And a big thank you to you as well for the co-creation of it.
Thank you. Before I'm going to ask my first question, I want to say that I understand that there are different ways to look at this, and that different individuals use different mechanisms for the creation of the experience of Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
And you explained that in general, the majority of people that have the experience of having Alzheimer's has to do with them being in denial about their lives, that they wish to forget, that there is something in them that is to them so painful they cannot deal with it.
This is a very, very generalized response, but it is true for many people, although it is experienced in a multitude of different ways.
Okay. Because I was wondering, we call this process also dementia.
Yes.
It almost seems like the personality structure of the people going through this experience is somehow dissolving, and that they are shifting through different dimensions very rapidly.
Yes, all sorts of mental disorders that in some way, shape, or form reflect or represent an alteration of personality, be it the idea you call of dementia or Alzheimer's, or even dissociative personality disorder or schizophrenia, these things have one thing in common, in general, at their core. It is in some way, shape, or form an inability, due to either belief systems or what have you, to not allow different aspects of the personality to harmonize and blend in a coherent way for the reality that they chose to be in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And I was also wondering, but what's happening on a soul level? How is the soul experiencing this process?
Well, again, it depends upon the reason why a soul may have agreed to have these kinds of experiences, or for the purposes that the soul needs those experiences, or simply in the way that the soul chooses to use them. So it will vary from soul to soul. But overall, the idea is one of seeking integration by creating dissociation, what appears to be disconnection, and then going through the process to arrive at a realization that disconnection is not real, but only an illusion. And that the paradox is, in order to actually have an experience of disconnection, you actually have to be connected. You have to be integrated to have an experience in some sense of disintegration.
Yes, I understand. And can you say that when people go through this process, that they eventually are able to look at the pain that they are, trying to avoid?
Some of them do and some of them don't. Again, it depends upon the choices that have been made for this life theme. Many of them give themselves the probability to arrive at that conclusion, but some of them choose not to, and they make their assessments in spirit after the life.
Okay. And I don't know, maybe in general, does the pain has to do with, a lack of self-worth?
It can. In general, again, a very generalized answer, everyone will have a specific way of experiencing this if they choose to. All pain is the result, fundamentally, of resistance to the natural self.
Yeah, I understand.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I also have a couple of questions concerning the Anunnaki.
Yes.
You mentioned that the Anunnaki were the first to genetically alter the DNA of the natural evolved Homo erectus here on Earth.
Yes, because at that point, the Homo erectus was available and compatible enough through panspermia millions of years before that for them to make the alteration and find enough similarity in their genetics to do so.
I understand. And I was wondering, after the Homo sapiens came into existence, have there been other alterations in our DNA due to other extraterrestrial races?
Yes, especially the Greys.
Especially the
Although they're not really an extraterrestrial race in the classic sense.
No, I understand. But for instance, the Pleiadians or any race we know of, do they made some alterations in our DNA also?
Well, not exactly in the same context. Some have been, by agreement, an energy shift that creates an alteration in your DNA by having you be given a frequency that then you choose to align with to create the alteration. But it's not a physiological manipulation in the typical sense.
Okay, I understand. And you also mentioned that the Anunnaki evolved, but did they evolve into a non-physical?
A few of them have, but basically what you know as the Pleiadians is one of the evolutionary offshoots.
Okay. So are the Anunnaki genetically linked to other extraterrestrial races that we know of? Yeah, you just explained it.
Well, I said Pleiadian, yes.
Okay.
And others that you may not know of.
Okay. Okay. And also concerning what we now talked about, I was wondering if I'm correct in my understanding that the Greys and the human beings have the same Anunnaki ancestors, but that the genetic alteration...
Well, not exactly the same, because the Greys come from an alternate version of reality. So they had their own history of interaction with the Anunnaki, but they're not the same Anunnaki because those Anunnaki belong in an alternate parallel universe.
Okay. Okay. Because I was wondering, I read somewhere that as a result, the people who eventually evolved into the Greys had a different expression of these genetic alterations than the human beings in this timeline. But that makes
Yes.
sense. Yeah.
Although the idea is that the humans of that version of Earth didn't, quote unquote, evolve into the Greys. They mutated themselves on purpose to be able to handle the environment that existed when they destroyed their version of Earth.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I thought, oh, it's a mutation. I thought
It's a mutation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for this.
Yes. It is the reason why some of their DNA can be compatible with the DNA of humans on your version of Earth and other versions of Earth, is because they actually started out as human.
Yes.
Otherwise, it would be too incompatible to create hybrids.
Hybrids, yes, exactly. Thank you for this.
Yes.
That was what I wanted to ask you today. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Pleasant dreams to you.
Thank you.
Bashar, I would like to ask you about the gravity well. What does it look like? What is it made of? What is its geometry? How can we replicate it? Thank you. I love you.
On the template level, it is again the idea of the distortion of the space-time field, the space-time fabric, the consciousness field itself. The idea of how it looks in template form is as, in a two-dimensional description, just for the sake of convenience, like two overlapping Fibonacci spirals going in opposite directions, radiating from a central point.
Hi.
And to you, good day.
Such a pleasure to see you again.
It is always a pleasure to interact with you as well.
I have a few short questions and then something to discuss with you.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the short questions.
All right.
There has been like two books written a long time ago around soul schools by Michael Newton, how we are always in a soul pod and we're actually in school learning to grow.
In many different
between
ways,
lives.
yes. In many different ways, yes.
Yes. And does this happen with more advanced or civilizations that are already aware of the different?
There is always more to learn. There is always room for growth. It never ends.
That's there is kind of like for you, like you say, you don't sleep, you don't eat. So is there still this this kind of sleep state that we go into, and then this awake state, although they can be the opposite at a soul level?
Yes.
That you experience, or it's more of just an understanding that?
For more, it's a constant experience of walking through different dimensions of space and time and spirit, constantly in a dream, constantly awake. But again, we also have what you might call mentors, teachers, higher dimensional beings that are also helping us to experience more things beyond the point to which we have already evolved. Again, it never ends. They have their mentors. They have their mentors.
Sure. So compared
And even the idea of all that is can still experience different versions of all that is. It never ends.
it can just become perhaps a little more conscious.
That is exactly what happens. You expand your consciousness to contain, in more awareness, another level within yourself.
Yes, got it. Thank you. Is the average human life expected to be longer?
Yes, because the paradox is the more you live in the moment, in a sense, the less aging you experience, and therefore you appear to live longer in physical terms.
But not necessarily in like how we calculate age.
Well, in other words, just as we, on average, though there are longer lived beings in our society, on average, will live to about 300, but will probably look to you like we're about 30.
Mm-hmm.
So you are achieving this slowly as humanity, many of you, not all of you, but many of you.
Because there's a lot of people are starting to talk about how actually we should be able to live up to 140 years.
Oh yes, easily. And most likely you will find that within the next 50 to 75 years, that might be about the average lifespan. Maybe 120 to 150, depending upon the individual.
Wow. But there is also this collective that needs to be moving along for that to be happening for those individuals as well.
Yes, but again, remember that when you shift to another version of Earth that already has that collective.
Right. That's true.
I know, that's why I said it.
Yeah, thank you. In the near future, will we find a new material to replace plastic, or would we be able to find a way to break down plastics sooner?
Well, both. What we utilize is based on something your scientists understand to be nanotechnological. And it is a kind of crystalline metallic form that has plastic qualities that can change and shift its shape as it needs to and provide many different kinds of effects and have many different kinds of uses. Our ships, in a sense, are grown, and they have this ability to shift their shape and even within the cabin to provide what we need when we need it, and when we don't need it, it simply absorbs back into the walls or the floors or the ceilings. And it's all made out of the same seamless material.
That's so exciting.
Yes. So you're approaching this idea of this nanotechnology slowly. You'll arrive at something similar in the relatively near future.
That's great. That's great. I don't know whether people have asked this, but as we're approaching open contact, and
Yes.
I'm just like putting everything you've spoken about, how in there is no in the whole in all that is, there is positive and negative and all that, so there must be positive and negative extraterrestrials as well.
Well, yes, but your planet is not really dealing with what you would consider to be truly the negative ones. There may be some that have different agendas than you that are visiting your world. There may be some that don't pay much attention to you. There may be some that don't necessarily understand you and so can come off somewhat negative or cold to you or unfeeling or uncaring. But none of them that you're dealing with are really what you would consider to be malevolent.
Is that because of the kind of school Earth is?
Yes, and also because the vibrational changing that you are aligning with simply doesn't allow for those kinds of beings to find the version of Earth that you're creating for yourself, because it's too vibrationally incompatible.
Meaning we're quite vibrationally positive?
Those that align with that are and can never experience something that's that vibrationally negative outside of your own reality. Because Earth is its own island in a sense, collectively speaking, and it's going through different kinds of transitions collectively as well. Most of them are simply not compatible with beings that you would find to be relatively malevolent, although of course there are some versions of Earth that are, but you're not on them. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking to you.
Sure. Yay. Okay, good. It makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah,
because there would be no point in it.
that's right. That's right.
So yes, there are versions of Earth experiencing extremely malevolent extraterrestrial beings, but that simply has nothing to do with the ones that we are communicating to you in.
Right. And that's not the one I'm in.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking.
Yes, got it.
One moment, we heard a question. Yes, of course, we might communicate with some versions of Earth that have the capacity to shift from the negative to the positive vibration, because certainly that's to some degree what we're doing with your experience of the different versions of Earth. But I'm simply saying that below a certain threshold, there's not going to be necessarily choices being made by the collective consciousness that would allow themselves to shift to something more positive, and therefore those are the ones that would be pointless for us at this point to communicate with. So yes, we might communicate with some that have the potential to change, but not with the ones that have chosen no potential to change in that direction.
Totally get it. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you, Bashar.
Good day.
Good day.